There are wounds we remember, and wounds we don't. Most people assume emotional pain comes from big, dramatic moments. The screaming, the arguments, the obvious scars, but the deepest wounds are often the quiet ones. The ones created slowly, silently, by the people we trusted first and needed the most. Parent wounds aren't always the result of cruelty. Sometimes they're born from absence, from inconsistency, from rules that suffocated your spirit, or freedom that overwhelmed your safety. Sometimes the wound is simply this: I needed something, and I didn't get it. Children rarely understand what's happening. They don't have the language for emotional neglect, or the insight to recognize emotional overcontrol. So instead, they internalize everything. They assume the problem is them. This is how the unconscious self is formed, from the stories we create to survive our childhood. If love felt conditional, you learned to perform. If affection was unpredictable, you learned to cling. If emotions were dismissed, you learned to silence yourself. If you grew up walking on eggshells, you learned to shrink. You didn't choose these patterns, you inherited them. But what's most haunting is that you carry these wounds long after childhood ends. Not as memories, but as behaviors, defense mechanisms, and beliefs about who you are. You might think you're overly independent, but you're actually afraid of being a burden. You might think you're low maintenance, but you're actually terrified of asking for what you need. You might think you're bad at relationships, but you're just repeating emotional survival strategies you learned before you even understood the word relationship. This is the tragedy of parent wounds. They are invisible, but they shape everything. Carl Jung once said, "The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parents." And he was right. We don't just inherit our parents' features. We inherit their fears, their coping mechanisms, their unresolved trauma, their emotional limitations. As children, we adapt to their world. As adults, we spend years trying to understand why we feel broken, not knowing we were shaped by environments that taught us to compromise parts of ourselves in exchange for love, safety, or approval. This chapter begins not with blame, but with awareness. Because becoming conscious of the wounds you carry is the first step toward healing them. You are not weak for being shaped by your past. You are human. And while you didn't choose your childhood, you can choose what you do with its echoes. This journey, the path of individuation, begins by seeing what was once hidden, by listening to the quiet pain you learned to ignore, by acknowledging the child inside you who did the best they could with the tools they had. The wounds you carry without noticing have been speaking your whole life. It's time to finally listen. Parent wounds are not always loud. Often they are made of whispers, subtle patterns that slip beneath your skin and become the quiet rules you live by. To understand parent wounds, we must understand the emotional environment that shaped you. Some wounds come from emotional neglect, not the absence of food or shelter, but the absence of being felt. When your feelings were ignored, minimized, or treated as inconvenient, you learned to hide them, to shrink them, or to stop trusting them altogether. Other wounds come from overcontrol, parents who dictated your choices, your behavior, even your personality. You learned that autonomy is dangerous, that mistakes are unacceptable, that love withdraws the moment you step outside the lines. Then there's inconsistency, the unpredictability of a parent who is warm one day and distant the next. A storm without a weather pattern. This creates children who grow into adults constantly scanning for emotional shifts, never sure when the ground will move beneath them. And perhaps the most silent wound of all, conditional love, love that depended on achievement, obedience, or perfection. Love that wasn't a home, but a reward you had to earn. These experiences don't disappear as you grow. They transform, they become internal voices. The neglected child grows an inner critic that whispers, "No one wants to hear your feelings. Don't bother people with your needs. You're safest when you stay quiet." The controlled child develops a voice that says, "Don't make a mistake. Don't take risks. You can't trust yourself." The child raised in inconsistency hears, "Don't relax. Be alert. Something is about to change." The child who received conditional love internalizes, "You are only worthy when you perform. You must earn connection. You must become what others need you to be. These voices shape your adult identity. You may become a perfectionist who fears being seen, a people pleaser who confuses self-sacrifice with love, an overthinker who tries to predict emotional danger, a detached adult who shuts down the moment someone gets too close, a caregiver who feels responsible for everyone but yourself, or an avoidant soul who keeps a relationship shallow to avoid disappointment. Parent wounds don't just shape your childhood, they shape the way you love, the way you trust, the way you respond to conflict, and the way you see yourself. They determine what you tolerate, what you fear, and what you believe you deserve. This is the psychology of parent wounds. They become invisible blueprints for the architecture of your adult life. But here's the quiet truth beneath all of this. The internal voices you carry are not your own. They were inherited. Echoes of someone else's pain, someone else's limitations, someone else's fears. Healing begins the moment you recognize that these voices can be questioned, rewritten, and replaced. Individuation, becoming who you truly are, starts when you realize you don't have to live the life your wounds designed. In the next chapter, we meet the part of you that has carried those wounds the longest, your inner child. There is a part of you that never made it out of childhood, a version of you, small, scared, hopeful, confused, that still lives inside your adult body like a ghost trapped in a familiar house. This ghost is your inner child, and whether you acknowledge it or not, it influences more of your life than you realize. Unresolved childhood experiences don't simply fade with time, they survive. They hide in the corners of your mind, waiting for moments that feel familiar, moments that echo the past. This is why you can be a fully grown adult and still feel like a small child when someone raises their voice, or when you're ignored, or when you're misunderstood. These are not overreactions. They are emotional flashback. Your inner child responding to a threat it remembers, even if your adult self cannot name it. A simple comment can make you feel unworthy. A moment of silence can feel like abandonment. A minor conflict can feel catastrophic. This is the inner child tugging at the strings of your nervous system. It reacts fast, instinctively, automatically, because that's what children do. They respond with emotion, not logic. They feel everything intensely because their survival once depended on it, and even now in adulthood, this child still seeks the same things they needed years ago. Protection. If you grew up unsafe, emotionally or physically, your inner child will push you toward avoidance. It will tell you to stay quiet, stay small, stay hidden. It believes safety is found in retreat. Validation. If your feelings were dismissed or mocked, your inner child will crave approval. It will overperform, overgive, overthink, all in an attempt to prove I'm worthy. Right? Connection. If love was inconsistent, your inner child will fear abandonment. It will cling, chase, or settle for less just to avoid that familiar emptiness. And if love was conditional, your inner child may struggle to trust anyone, including yourself. This part of you isn't trying to sabotage your life. It's trying to protect you based on rules it learned long ago, rules that no longer fit your present reality. But the inner child doesn't know that. It only knows what it felt. It doesn't grow, it doesn't evolve, it doesn't update its understanding of the world. It keeps repeating the same emotional patterns because the pain was never resolved, the fear was never soothed, the need was never met. This is why Jung believed the inner child must be brought into the light, not to blame the past, but to liberate the present. Because healing begins when the adult you finally turns inward and says to that ghost inside you, "You're safe now, I hear you, I see you. You don't have to protect me alone anymore." Only then does the child release its grip. Only then do your reactions become your own. Only then can you begin to live as an adult, not as the echo of a wounded child. Every child learns quickly, not just how to walk or speak, but how to adapt. A child observes the emotional weather of their home and adjusts themselves like a compass trying to find north. They learn what earns love, what causes anger, what brings silence, and what makes them feel safe or unsafe. And in this quiet learning, something happens beneath the surface. The child begins to split. The acceptable parts, the polite, pleasing, obedient traits, are brought into the light. But the parts that trigger disapproval, discomfort, or punishment are pushed into the dark. This dark, hidden space is what Carl Jung called the shadow, the collection of qualities you were forced to suppress in order to survive, belong, and be loved. If your anger frightened your parents, you learned to bury it. If your sensitivity annoyed them, you hid it behind a hardened mask. If your curiosity was seen as rebellion, you became compliant. If your voice caused conflict, you learned to silence it. These traits didn't disappear. They became shadow parts, exiled pieces of your personality that were never allowed to exist. Parent wounds are the architects of this shadow. The parent who dismissed your emotions taught you to suppress your vulnerability. The parent who controlled you taught you to suppress your autonomy. The parent who overwhelmed you taught you to suppress your boundaries. The parent who never listened taught you to suppress your voice. And for years, you learned to show only the parts that were safe, the parts that wouldn't rewrite the fragile script of your childhood. But here's the truth, Jung empfanden. The shadow does not stay hidden. It grows. It gains power. It influences your behavior in ways you don't see. The anger you suppress becomes passive aggression. The sensitivity you hid turns into numbness. The curiosity you silenced becomes fear of risk. The autonomy you lost becomes rebellion later in life. The voice you swallowed becomes anxiety in every relationship. The shadow leaks through the cracks because it wants to be integrated, not ignored. And this is why confronting your shadow is essential for healing parent wounds. Because the parts you hid were never bad. They were simply unwelcome in an environment that didn't know how to hold them. Healing begins when you allow those suppressed parts to step out of the dark and return to you. When you say to your anger, "I'm not afraid of you anymore." When you say to your sensitivity, "You were never a weakness." When you say to your voice, "You deserve to be heard." When you say to your autonomy, "You're allowed to choose now." Integrating the shadow means reclaiming the full spectrum of who you are, not the edited version shaped by fear, but the authentic self you had to abandon to survive. Individuation, the core of Jungian healing, begins at the moment you stop running from your shadow and start listening to what it has been trying to tell you since childhood. There comes a moment in every person's life, quiet, subtle, almost imperceptible, when you realize that the life you're living is not entirely your own. Your fears, your habits, your reactions, your beliefs about yourself. So many of them were shaped long before you ever had a choice. We inherit more from our parents than eye color or last names. We inherit patterns, ways of loving, ways of coping, ways of communicating, ways of protecting ourselves from pain. And these inherited patterns become the blueprint for how we move through the world. Jung called the process of breaking free from these unconscious blueprints individuation. The lifelong journey of becoming who you truly are, not who you were trained to be. This path begins with a realization. You are not your parents' expectations. You are not their fears. You are not their unhealed wounds. You are not the version of yourself you had to perform to earn love. You are more, but to become that more, you must first look at the patterns that were handed to you. If you grew up with a parent who needed constant control, you may find yourself either surrendering too easily or fighting authority at every turn. If you had a parent who rarely offered affection, you might struggle to trust intimacy or cling too tightly in fear of losing it. If you learned that success was the only way to receive approval, you may live in a constant state of self-criticism, never able to rest, never feeling enough. Individuation asks you to examine these patterns and ask a simple yet life-altering question. Does this truly belong to me? Not every inherited belief is yours to carry. Not every emotional reflex is yours to keep. Not every fear deserves to follow you into adulthood. Individuation is the process of sorting through the psychological inheritance your childhood gave you, keeping what aligns with your authentic self and gently releasing what doesn't. It's the moment you stop saying, "I am this way because of my parents," and start saying, "I get to choose who I become." It's choosing your own boundaries, even if you never learned healthy ones at home. It's forming your own values, even if they differ from the ones you were raised with. It's trusting your own voice, even if it was silenced for years. It's creating a life that reflects your inner truth, not the expectations written for you by others. And although the path of individuation is liberating, it's not easy. It requires honesty, courage, the willingness to disappoint people who benefited from your silence or compliance. But every step you take toward your true self is a step away from the past that shaped you and closer to the future you choose. Individuation is not becoming a different person. It is becoming yourself, minus the masks, minus the inherited wounds, minus the roles you played to survive. It is the moment you stand fully in your own identity and say, this is who I am, not who I was told to be, not who I had to be, but who I choose to be now. At some point in adulthood, Owen, you realize something quietly heartbreaking. No one is coming to give you the childhood you needed, but there's another truth hidden inside that grief, one that is softer, more empowering, and deeply transformative. You can learn to give it to yourself. Reparenting is not about blaming your parents or rewriting the past. It's about understanding the simple, human reality that the child you once were still lives inside you, still longs for safety, still seeks comfort, still wants to be seen with gentleness. And now, you are the only one with the power to give that child what they never received. To reparent yourself is to become the stable, nurturing, consistent presence you needed when you were young. It begins with awareness, the ability to notice when you're reacting from old wounds instead of your present self. When you shut down during conflict, that's your inner child seeking protection. When you panic at the thought of being abandoned, that's your inner child fearing loss. When you feel guilty for resting or saying no, that's your inner child still seeking approval. Reparenting means pausing long enough to say, I see you, I hear you, you're safe with me. This awareness becomes the foundation on which internal safety is built. For many people, safety was something unpredictable, conditional, fragile, or inconsistent. So you create it now through self-soothing, grounding, and emotional regulation. You learn to breathe through discomfort instead of collapsing under it. You learn to comfort yourself without shame. You learn that emotions are not threats. They are signals, messages, information. Then comes boundaries, the part of reparenting that feels the most unfamiliar to those who grew up without them. Boundaries are not walls. They are doors with locks you control. They are the gentle statements of self-worth that say, I matter too. I deserve respect. My needs are not inconveniences. Setting boundaries is the adult way of protecting the child within. And slowly, with practice, you begin replacing old inherited scripts with new ones you choose consciously. The script that said, "Masimi, you must earn love," becomes I am worthy of love simply because I exist. The script that said, "Don't upset anyone," becomes, "My feelings and needs are valid." The script that said, "Be small to stay safe," becomes, "I am allowed to take up space in this world." Reparenting is not a quick process. It is slow, patient, daily work. It is giving yourself the kindness you were never taught. It is treating yourself with the gentleness you once begged for silently. And little by little, you become the adult your childhood self needed. The protector, the nurturer, the guide. Not perfect, not flawless, just present. Reparenting is the promise you make to yourself. I will no longer abandon the parts of me that were abandoned. I am here. I will stay. And together, we will heal. There is a moment in healing quiet, unannounced, almost ordinary when you realize something has shifted. You're no longer fighting your past. You're no longer running from it. You're no longer shaped entirely by it. You're beginning to live as someone who is whole. Wholeness doesn't mean perfection. It doesn't mean your wounds have vanished, or that your fears have dissolved, or that the shadows of childhood never whisper anymore. Wholeness means something far more powerful. Every part of you finally has a place to belong. The inner child, scared, hopeful, tender, is no longer trapped in the past. You listen to them now. You hold them with compassion instead of shame. The shadow, the parts of you once buried, now stands beside you. No longer hostile, no longer dangerous, just misunderstood and finally welcomed into the light. And your conscious self, the you who is aware, awake, present, has become the bridge that brings all these parts together. Integration is not a single event. It is a quiet agreement you make with yourself day after day. I will not abandon any part of me again. This is the essence of individuation, Jung's lifelong journey toward becoming whole. It's not about becoming a new person. It's about reclaiming the person you always were beneath the conditioning, beneath the fear, beneath the wounds that shaped your early life. Individuation feels like learning to breathe in a way you never knew you were allowed to. It feels like speaking with a voice that once stayed silent out of fear. It feels like making choices that align with your truth, not the expectations you inherited. It feels like looking in the mirror and seeing, perhaps for the first time, yourself. And as you move forward, something surprising happens. The past loses its power. Not because you erase it, but because you integrate it. You stop trying to be the child hoping for a different outcome. You stop trying to perform the role your parents once needed you to play. You stop trying to please ghosts who cannot be satisfied. Instead, you live from a place of inner authority, a place where you choose who you are and how you move through the world. This freedom is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is subtle, steady, rooted. It is the freedom of someone who has made peace with their story and now writes the next chapters with intention. And as this journey closes, you realize healing was never about becoming someone different. Healing was about remembering the wholeness that was always inside you. The child who wanted to be loved, the shadow who wanted to be seen, the adult who wanted to finally breathe. And now, as you step into the fullness of who you are, you can finally say, I am not just the product of my past, I am the creator of my future. I am whole, I am becoming, and I am free.